boys and girls, one of the things that I wanted to point out to you today is the importance of including text evidence in your persuasive essay. Okay, the reason why this is important is because people will believe you if you can quote an expert. Okay, people will agree with you if they realize that people in authority also share the same opinion that you do. What you want to be able to do as an essayist, as a writer of persuasive essays, is to be able to not only, as we learned yesterday, influence people by the words you choose, but influence people by the experts that you quote and the text evidence that you choose to include in your essay. Now, today I want to teach you two different ways in which you can include information from the text or from research. Let's take a look at our zoos text set that we've been working with the last couple of days. Now, we've already kind of annotated the text, marking down the parts that we think are important and identifying some of the main ideas that we could use in an essay. And then yesterday, we looked through to identify some of the specific vocabulary words in which we could use to influence the thinking and the feeling of our reader. But today, I want to look for pieces of the text that we can quote directly. We want to be able to quote some things directly. Now, when we were reading this before, we identified the idea of the fact that zoos are harmful to animals because they cause a mental illness called zoochosis. Now, we also noticed that the symptoms, if you look at paragraph 2, it described the symptoms of zoochosis. Okay, this is an important thing to include in our essay because it gives us power and authority. How many of you, give me a thumbs up, how many of you when you read this suddenly made a connection to something you saw in a zoo at one time? When you read about the pacing back and forth, the bobbing their heads, give me a thumbs up if you automatically made a connection. Well, if you made a connection like that, then guess what? Your reader is also going to make a connection like that. So we're going to want to quote some of the symptoms. Now, we don't want to quote everything, and we certainly don't want to quote long sections of passages, but I'm looking at this paragraph and I'm thinking that this part right here, animals with this disease often pace back and forth, twist their necks, bob their heads up and down, turn in never-ending circles, and even tear holes in their own skin. I think that is an important piece of information, an important section of text to include in our writing. But how do we do that? Okay, we can't just copy it. They're not our words. If we just say it, okay, we're not giving any authority to those words, and we're kind of plagiarizing. So we want to place those words in quotation marks. Everybody show me air quotation marks. All right, so we're going to quote when we quote. But we also have to introduce the text when we do it. So take a look at your reference sheet. Take a look at your chart. The side that says using quotations from a text. You have to kind of introduce it. Let's look at the first strategy there. It says that you can start by saying, in the text it says, and in this example I would say, in source 1, zoochosis, which is the title of the text. I've identified the source and the title because I'm working with the text set. In source 1, zoochosis, it says, and then I could include my quote. With the quotation marks, I can copy those words directly from the text as long as I put the quotation marks. And then look what they have here afterwards. They have parentheses and they have a number. Okay, that's actually the page number in which That's the page number in which it occurred in this text by Simon. Simon was the author. Now, in our case, we don't know. We actually do know. We know Santana and Lucaus. We know Santana and Lucaus are the people that wrote this, but we might not know the names of the people. In our parentheses, we could put paragraph 2. Because we've already said source 1, Zeuxis, we've quoted, and we can say which paragraph we got it from. Now this is called citing the text, C-I-T-E, citing the text, where you're giving the citations, just like we used on the Jacksonville Public Library toolbox that they had, and we had the citations. You're basically giving credit to the author of the text. Now, you can also kind of summarize what was said. In this case, that doesn't really work for us, but you could summarize by only including a few of those symptoms. Some of the symptoms mentioned in source 1, Zeuxis, were, and you might just put them in your own words. In that case, you still have to include the parentheses after this. You still have to introduce it and say where it came from. All right, thumbs up if you understand that. Okay, so that's the first strategy. All right, the second strategy would to be kind of able to summarize something. So let's take a look. I was thinking about this story about Junior down here. Now, that's a pretty powerful story, but it's very long, and I really don't want to quote the whole story, but I'm going to want to paraphrase. Look at the other side. Look at the other side of your source sheet, and it has the word paraphrasing. Okay? Paraphrasing is sort of kind of writing a summary of what you read. You're putting it in your own words. You're including the information that's there, the facts that are there, but you're relaying it in your own words. All right, so let's read this together. Follow along with me about Junior. Junior is not alone. There are many aquatic animals that are taken from their natural habitats and placed in water tanks and aquariums around the world. These animals are separated from their families and are forced to live in groups that are nothing like their own families. As though that isn't enough, animals like whales and dolphins, who are accustomed to swimming up to 100 miles in one day and diving hundreds of feet, are forced to live in confined spaces. Do you think they can get this type of exercise in a water tank? We don't think so. Okay, so that's a lot of information. Okay, what I'd like you to do right now is I'd like you to go ahead and turn and talk with a partner. And I want you to kind of write in the air, practice paraphrasing what is being said in that paragraph. Okay, go ahead and turn and talk. Around here and you can do
How can we paragraph 5? Yeah. How about oh, okay. So basically find out what was phrased on that. Writers use direct quotations or paraphrasing.
Oh, boys and girls, let me stop you for a second. Grady and Carson noticed that there is information about Junior in paragraph 4 and 5, so that they wanted to go back and include some information about juniors, so you might want to do that, okay? All right, keep talking.
How can you summarize that? How can you summarize okay, so basically, this is basically about a whale. How it's about an animal. About a whale. How to lead it died because it has to be zoo because the zoo kind of not always, but like
Okay, guys, let's do some sharing of some of the discussions that you were having. One of the strategies that Grady and Carson were doing was they were marking spots, they were underlining in the paragraphs the key things that they thought were important. And I think that was a great strategy. So let's try to continue that. So one of the things that they thought were important, Grady, give me one of the things you thought you guys marked in your text that you think is important to include in a paraphrase. Okay, so his name and the killer whale. Why do you think it's important to include his name? Why do you think it's important?
Because the name will wonder what animal it is.
Right, if you just give the name and you don't say it's a killer whale, the people will wonder.
It might be a lion, it might be a cheetah.
Right, they need to know that. But why do you think it's important to give the name of the animal, not the kind of animal it is, which is important too, but why do you want to give it its name?
Because aren't there multiple killer whales?
Well, there certainly are, and that certainly could distinguish between other killer whales that people know about. Adrian? Well, that's an idea. Jalen?
Some people could find like this story or another story about the killer whale.
Okay, I want you to think about something. Let me just share something with you. My family comes from farmers. On the farm, you don't name the animals. Do you know why you don't name the animals on a farm? Because you're probably going to be eating them. If you're not eating them, someone else is. And when you name an animal, it is no longer livestock, it is what?
It's like your pet.
It's your pet.
You get attached.
It's your pet and you're attached to it. So, if you name the animal in your essay, right, are you going to get your reader to think and feel in different ways? Absolutely. Absolutely. So it's really a good strategy to include Junior's name and to identify him as a killer whale. Okay, what else? What else is important to this paraphrase? What other facts do we need to include? Alexander, you and Chase were working together. I was kind of leaning in, listening to you. What else did you think was important to include?
Many aquatic animals have been taken from their natural habitats.
Okay, so we want to think about being taken or removed from their natural habitats. So we want to make sure that we underline that, taken out of natural habitats. Now, it's mentioned a couple of times, but we only need to mention it once, right? Okay, what else is an important thing? Okay, Federico?
Animals are separated from their families and forced to live in groups that are nothing like their own family.
Okay, so how could we kind of shorten that up and say that How can we summarize that? Yes?
You could just put animals or separated.
Okay, well, but that does include all of the information, right? Okay, well, so we have an unnatural habitat. What else do we have that's unnatural in here? What do we have that's unnatural? The family. So we have an unnatural habitat and an unnatural family situation. Okay, can you see how that combines both parts of that? So we have that they are forced to live, or they are living in a situation where they're in an unnatural habitat and unnatural families. Okay, so let's just say that we continued this process and we came up with a good paraphrasing of this, where we talk about Junior the killer whale was forced to live in an unnatural habitat, in an unnatural family situation, and he died 4 years later. Okay, all of those things are important information. Now, that's a paraphrase of what we read, and then we could begin it, if we look at our source sheet, we could begin it by saying, in the text, or in source 1, zoochosis, or source 1, zoochosis, tells a story about Junior the killer whale, who was removed from his habitat and forced to live in an unnatural family situation. This caused him to die 4 years later. That's a paraphrase. Okay? You still have to identify the text. Identify it by the title. If you know the authors, you can definitely also include the authors. Okay, any questions before I send you back to work on your essays? Okay, so while you're working today, I want you to make sure that as you are developing your ideas, as you are those sentences where you introduce your details and elaborate on them, that you're making sure that you are citing text evidence either by providing a quote or providing a paraphrase from the text. Okay, you can go ahead and get up and